Right, so I finished all the painting of the armor and the frame. I just want to show you what the paints look like, how they came up, and as far as I'm concerned, they are fantastic. I've become a bit of a convert with these paints. I think the finish is super fine. Now you can see a divot in the middle there, but that's a sink mark that I didn't take care of, so that's not the fault of the paint. That's me not being obsessive enough, I don't think, but just super smooth. And really for me it's been a bit of a lesson in how to airbrush properly. So normally when I'm using Vallejo paints, I'm really trying to force them through the airbrush. I'll push it out at 20 psi or something, have it thinned down, and have all sorts of issues with paint drying on the needle tip, etc. So this stuff is an absolute pleasure. I've had my airbrush down to about 10 psi, 10 or 11, and literally just a slightest squeeze of the trigger, hardly anything in it, and it just whisper paint over the surface, and the coverage is fantastic. So really happy with that. And what I'm really interested in doing is trying to do panel lines without a gloss varnish. So normally when I'm painting with water-based acrylics, I'll put a all-clad aqua gloss coat over the top. I tend to find that just helps the Tamiya panel line accent color that I use flow a little bit better. But I reckon this stuff I won't need to do that. I don't expect the enamel panel liner to affect the underlying paint in this case. Given that it is enamel or oil based, it shouldn't have any issues with the lacquer based paint, so I'm pretty confident that should work okay. Just to show a different colour, so this is the blue, and you can just see it's this beautiful smooth finish. Yeah, really happy with that paint. The pigment's nice and fine, and really vibrant colours. The metallic I used, so I used this metallic steel for the frame parts, and I used a black gloss varnish. Sorry, I used a black gloss paint underneath it, and the steel over the top gave this sort of really beautiful dark steel. Now you can see in the image there, you can still see the fleck, you can see the metallic flecks in it, but that's actually, it's being probably accentuated on camera. It's not as bad as that in real life. The pigment is very small compared to some other metallics that I've used in the past, and I just found that it gives this sort of beautiful beautiful gleam to the armor parts. Now, just on the armor parts, what I have done in the past using Vallejo metal color is I've actually put a matte varnish over the top of it, and people would sort of say, oh, why are you doing that? Why would you put a matte over a metallic finish? And for me, it just gives a bit more of a realistic look when I think about metallic finish on machinery. More often than not, it's not that shiny. It will be sometimes covered in grease or what have you, but even if it's cast metal doesn't normally have a really high shine to it or high gloss. So I tend to find by putting a matte over the top of a metallic, you still get that hint of metallic come through, but it's nowhere near as obvious. And I know a lot of people are just happy just to paint their frames grey, and I can understand why we'd do that. Next, on to panel lining. So I use Accent Colour by Tamiya, and I have actually found problems with the grey panel line colour in the past. So I'm going to use the grey on the white armour pieces, but I have had issues with it in the past where it's actually turned green. So if anyone's had that occur to them and knows why that's happening, I don't know whether it's because of the the aqua gloss I've used, or is it is it being interfered with by the matte varnish over the top of it? I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, I've tried a couple of different bottles. I threw my first bottle out because I thought it was a dodgy bottle, but I've had issues since. So I've tried it on I'm going to try it on the white armor pieces for this particular kit and see if that turns green. But of course, for a lot of it, it's going to be black. Certainly for things like these grey pieces that I've done, for the weapons and what have you. They've got some small indentations there, which just put a little bit of panel line accent colour in there. And what I use to clean up my accent colour or enamel washes is this stuff, Shellite, which is one of the active ingredients in Zippo fluid. So I know a lot of people use Zippo fluid to clean up enamels. I just find that Zippo fluid's quite expensive for what it is, but Shellite just works a treat. It can be quite aggressive as far as removing the enamel paint, so you want to be really gentle with removing it with a cotton bud. But this is what I use, and it's good stuff. And this is just generic stuff you can get in Australia. It's nice and cheap. I also use the Diggers brand acrylic thinner. Lacquer thinner. It comes in a big 4-litre tin, and I use that for cleaning out my airbrush. I find that generic lacquer thinners are perfectly fine for cleaning out an airbrush. Although just on that, you want to make sure that your airbrush has solvent safe seals in it, the little rubber grommets in your airbrush. Sometimes some airbrush manufacturers, the seals that they use are not solvent safe. So I've just, I know that for these Grex ones, using lacquer thinner in here is perfectly fine. So just be aware of that. Alright, so next step is to do some panel lining. So obviously what you need is some sort of enamel wash. You can of course just buy any of the XF colours from Tamiya and you can thin them down yourself, or you can use something that's pre-mixed like this. These things, you need to shake them. You need to, as Bob Ross would say, beat the devil out of them, because they tend to settle. So just give it a really good shake. And of course, you want to make sure that you brush a lot of it off, because or otherwise you'll end up with a massive globule of enamel paint that ruins your piece. And so all I'm going to do here is just drop it in, and you'll see how it just runs down. And it doesn't matter if you go over, so you can see here, there's a couple of blobs there, bit of a miss. That's fine. That's where the Shellite comes in, that's used to clean that up. So I'm just going to do a couple more here. You're just using the capillary action of the very thin enamel paint to basically flow through all the grooves and the cracks and what have you. So I'm going to pick something else that's maybe got some, at least a assemblage of a panel line on it. So literally just dabbing it down, and you can see how it sort of travels down the it just follows the flow of the line there. And I've got to say, it seems to be flowing perfectly fine. Like I said, normally I would use a gloss varnish, but for these ones it looks like that there's absolutely no need for me to do that. Focus, come on. Why are we struggling there? Now, I know some people will slather this stuff on and then wipe it off with cotton buds and, enamel thinner or what have you, but you don't need a lot of it. And the cleaner that you put this stuff in, the less cleanup that you have to do. which, trust me, is the best way to go, because as soon as you've got a lot of cleanup, it just becomes quite messy. So here we go. Oops, here we go. That's what you've got to be careful of. Get your finger in the way. Now I will leave the panel line wash in there for a good half hour before trying to clean it up. So that way it gives the enamel a bit of a chance to sort of dry and bite in a little bit. And then you can start cleaning it up. Yep, hit the camera, good on you. Yeah. As you probably guessed, I've got the camera pretty close to the desk, so I want to hit it every now and then, unfortunately. I actually find this process quite soothing, quite relaxing. You know, you just sort of step through it, and there's no rush. I mean, we do this as a hobby, so it's important to remember you don't have to rush anything. Yeah, see, I made a big mess there, but that's alright, that'll clean up fine. Just a dab, dab, dab. But again, it's not about running the brush all the way along the line. You only really need to dab it, let gravity do the work, let capillary action do the work. Oh, made a massive mess there. Right. That's alright, I'll leave it and I'll come back and clean that up. So what I'm going to do is go through and do the rest of the panel lining on the pieces I have, and then the next step will be to do a matte varnish. Oh, actually, no, before that I've got decals to do. So again, normally if I do decals, I will put a gloss varnish down on water-based acrylics, but I think in this case I'm going to give it a shot of just putting the decals straight down on the pieces. So that's what I'll be doing after I've done the panel lining. So I'll do all the panel lining, come back, show you how I clean it up, and then we'll look at decals. Okay, so it's been about half an hour, 40 minutes, so all the panel lining has been done. Now it's just a matter of cleaning it up. So there's a couple of things you need. You need cotton buds. You know, I use two types, these just generic ones, and also these ones with the sharp point on. I find they're really good for, you know, if you've got really small detailed areas. And of course just a bit of a paper towel to you know, get the excess shellite off. Now I showed the shellite before. I just decant a bit of it into a small tomato bottle because I tend to find that it's a bit easier to deal with in a smaller bottle. Okay. The other thing you might find helpful, and I know I do because I have old people's eyes, is just what would you call them? Not Optivisor, because that's I believe that's a brand name, but these are just glasses, magnifying glasses. These ones come with a LED at the front of them, but I tend to not bother with that. But they do have interchangeable lenses, which I find really useful. So if I'm doing really detailed sort of, you know, photo etch stuff, I might go to a higher magnification. But I find that they're very helpful for me when I'm doing panel lining or what have you. Alright, so I'm going to start with this piece here, and you can see that there is a panel liner in there, but I just want to take it off those tips of those fins. There's a little bit on the edge of that bottom right hand vent, so I just want to clean that up. So take a cotton bud, open up the shellite, dunk it in, dab the excess off on the paper towel, And what I'm going to do is just literally run it over the top, nice and gentle. Don't have to be rough. You're not scraping it away, you're letting the shell light do all the work. So I'm literally just brushing it across the surface. And it seems to be cleaning up pretty well on, like I said before, this is just a painted surface, so there's no gloss coat on this. But it seems to be coming off just fine. And there we can see that's a lot better than what it was. The one thing you do have to be aware of is these are cheap and nasty cotton buds, so they tend to have a lot of fluff with them. So you want to be careful that you want to remove all that before you put a flat coat down, otherwise it will ruin your paint job. And the other good thing about this stuff is that if you mess it up, you can actually just go back in there and sort of, you know, put a little bit more in. But, yep, that's pretty good. Okay, maybe I'll pick one where it's a bit more. How's this one looking? This one isn't actually too bad as it stands. It's just the slightest bit of slightest bit where I dabbed it in. Like I said, the cleaner you are when you're actually applying it, the less work you've got to do in the actual cleanup. Now, of course, this is black on grey, so it's a little bit difficult to see, certainly on camera, but it will become a lot more obvious once you put a matte coat down. So I tend to find a matte coat will soon show any part where you've missed the cleanup, and it'll stick out like anything. So just be mindful of that. But you really do want to up the camera. Good on you. You want to be really careful in cleaning this stuff up and make sure you don't miss any, because yep, it looks pretty rubbish if you matte coat over the top of it and you haven't cleaned it up properly. So I'm being very careful not to sort of dig down into the recesses where I want the enamel to stay. Just literally brushing over the top. You can go across the panel line. And that's pretty clean. Now I noticed that the SMS brand, they actually supply their own enamel weathering products. So my next order, I might actually give them a shot and see how they go. I mean, the black panel liner from Tamiya I find is perfectly fine. I've not had any problems with that. But the grey one, I don't know why it goes green, but it does. So, mind you, I've just been lazy. I do actually have some Tamiya enamel paints there that I should just thin down. Okay, so that's looking good. So I'm going to go through and do the panel lining for the rest of the parts, and then I will do the decals. Now, normally you would do the decals first, especially if you've got decals that go over panel lines, that sort of thing. You would, bed the decals in, the water slide decals, and then maybe put a gloss coat and then do the panel lines. Now, in this case, I'm not doing any decals where they go over panel lines, so there's nothing wrong with me doing the panel lining first. So I'll go through and do all that, and then the next step will be I'll take you through the process I use to create, to do the water slide decals. So now all the panel lining is done, it's a matter of doing the decals. So I'll just quickly take you through the process I use for putting water slide decals down. Now I've got some of the Bandai decals. This is supposedly for the RX782 Gundam version 2.0, some 1 Year War decals. So I'll probably end up using some of these, especially for the white base decals. But I think the main one I'm probably going to use is some of these third-party ones. Now, these are probably really difficult to see. I'll try and, but you'll notice that they're actually white, and they are tiny, tiny little warning decals, and they're produced by Haiku Parts. These are 1100 RB01 in white, and they're just fantastic. Great variety of sort of warning decals, really well sized for 1100. So I think probably a lot of these I'll end up using. So that's the decals. What you need for putting water slide decals down, of course, is some water. Now I use this decal tray, which is from Wave. Sorry, it's a little bit hard to see. It's got water in it, but it actually has a drawer. I'll try. There we go. So it has a little drawer that pulls up, which means that you're not sort of chasing around the decals in the water. So it's just a real good system. I'm sure other companies make a similar thing, but yeah, the one I use is Wave. So I'm just going to put that out of the way so I don't spill it everywhere. The other thing, of course, I just use a Tamiya knife. I really like these knives, especially the handles, with this divot on here to stop it sort of rolling about. I think more implements that we use should have something like that on them. Just a bit of paper towel to dab the cotton buds. These are some Tamiya tweezers. You're probably getting an impression now I'm a bit of a Tamiya fanboy, but the truth is they actually make really good tools. So the great thing about these particular tweezers is they actually have a flattish nose on them, and they have very thin, up here. So it makes trying to pick something up off the mat can sometimes be really difficult. But these are fantastic for that. You can literally just pick up the corner by a smidge and just yeah, they're really good. Definitely made for decals. Now there's multiple products you can use for setting and dissolving them. So I use the microscale, microset, microsol, and you'll notice I've got numbers on the top of them, 1 and 2. The reason for that is so I don't forget the order in which they go down, because they've got sort of similar names. So I think that I think Fox from Model Making Guru is responsible for that idea. So thank you very much for that. It's certainly helpful for me. I've got them stuck to this base here just so that they don't sort of fall over. They're sort of fairly tall bottles, so they tend to trip over. I tend to knock them over quite regularly, so I've got them sort of stuck to this space here. So the microset goes down first, and then the microsol. So the microset helps to dissolve the carrier film on the decal a little bit, but it also helps with the surface tension, whereas the microsol is really about sort of dissolving, dissolving that carrier film, so it looks like the decal is painted on. So I have a couple of branded old brushes here, one for microset, one for sol, just so I don't have to bother washing them or anything. They're pretty ready, but doesn't matter. So the first step is is to select a piece that I want to sort of put a decal on. So I'm going to select this. This is from the Hyper Bazooka, and I think I am sort of loosely going by the instructions. So basically they say there should be a decal that goes, you know, along the bottom down here. So I'm going to find something that I think will fit. And again, I'm going to put on my old man's glasses. Sorry, this is blowing out a bit on the video. I am aware that it is blowing out a little bit on the camera. Okay, so I think I'll probably go with something that's quite narrow, so probably something like these. And the good thing about them is they've got little squares next to the text, you know, and they sort of alternate which side they go with. So I might cut out this pair here. Put that aside, and then using these tweezers just to pick up the edge. You see that you can pick it up. I'm just going to dunk them in the water. Next one. Now some people have their water warm for soaking decals, and you know, that can help speed up the process of, because what you've got is the decals have an adhesive on the back of them, and the water sort of slowly reactivates that adhesive, and you know, the decals sort of lift off the carrier film, and having warm water can help speed up that process. But I'm never in that much of a hurry anyway, so I've just got cold tap water. I find that's fine. While they're soaking, I can move on to the next bit that I want to put decals on. Now, one of the hardest things to do is, or one of the most frustrating things can be, is actually putting decals on a curved surface. So one thing that I do, and usually because you're trying to hold the piece, you know, stop it rolling away and trying to maneuver the decal down, what I tend to find is these sort of clips are really good for managing that. So you can literally just sort of put them in, and then that way you can hold them a certain way, and they don't get away from you. So this is for the rocket launcher that goes on the beam rifle, I believe. So I'm going to find a different decal that is probably a bit larger. Too many decisions. Alright, I think I will use these long ones with, they've got sort of caution strips on them. I'm not sure what the text says, but one thing that I really like about these high-Q decals is they, where the text is large enough to read, it does actually, you know, it says something that kind of makes sense, whether it's warning or caution, hot surface, you know, those sort of things. So I really like them. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Bandai decals are good. They're certainly really high quality. But yeah, these high-Q ones I just tend to go, they're my go-to for things like warning. So again, I am just soaking them in the water. Just make sure they're fully submerged. And one thing I forgot to get ready is a toothpick, because I tend to use a toothpick to maneuver the decal off the backing sheet. Alright, so got some decals for that one, a decal for that one, and then I'll just keep moving on to, you know, the next piece and sort of work out which decal I want to use for this. So I think this one might have a squarish kind of decal. So let's see what I got. And sometimes it's a matter of sort of just checking to see that it'll fit. You know, some of these decals are sort of quite large. You know, they go from sort of being really small to being quite large. I think I might use one of these. Again, too many choices. I mean, that is the advantage of using the Bandai ones. At least they're sort of predetermined for you as to what you're actually going to use. I think I will go with Blast Air. That sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? I have a couple of those, I reckon. Because there is likely to be a blast of air coming out of the bottom of the backpack. Just make sure you sort of keep your decal sheet away from your water so you don't accidentally sort of spill water on the whole set of decals. I've done that before, and it can be disastrous if you don't sort of mop it up in time. The good thing about decals is that that they can be quite forgiving in the respect of once you've sort of set them down, if you're not happy with the location, you can wet them again to reactivate the adhesive on them and move them around again. Unlike a sticker, which stickers are rubbish. I don't know why Bandai doesn't include water slides as well as stickers. I understand stickers, are better for kids who want to put a Gundam together, but I think especially for master grade, they really should be including water slides. Okay, so we have this tiny little decal here. Tiny. It's not going to focus on it. You can't even see it. But it's just a matter of sort of gently nudging it with a toothpick to sort of see if it'll come free. And this one is fine. So I'll just get rid of that backing film. And you can sort of see it's just sort of floating. There's a little bit of water underneath it. And it's just going to be a matter of me sort of tweaking it with the tweezers to get it in the right position. So I'm just nudging it around. And if you find it gets stuck, you can always just get a cotton bud and add more water to it. So I'm kind of happy with that location there. So the next step is to get a cotton bud and you use sort of a rolling motion, because what you want to do is you want to squeeze all the water that's sitting underneath it. You want to squeeze all that out. Now you'll notice that I didn't use microset for this one, and the reason for that is because it's so small. I tend to find that it doesn't actually make much of a difference with a smaller one, so I'll certainly be using it for the bigger ones. But I'll squeeze that water out. Okay, but what I will do is I will put some microsol on it. I'll just do the other side before I do that. So, and I should add, what I do is when I bring the decal out of water, there'll be quite a bit of water on it, so I'll just tap the edge on the paper towel and that'll bleed a lot of that water off. Okay. So again, just sliding it down, maneuvering it into place. Just be careful, if you've got decals on the other side, you don't want to be interfering with those. You don't want to sort of mess them up. And just squeezing the water out. You don't have to use too much force, you're just using enough to sort of pin it down in place and squeeze out any water. Now you've probably heard of the term silvering, which of course is where you get air trapped underneath the decal and it creates a bit of a sort of a silver look to it. Part of that is the adhesive not sticking to the underlying surface properly, and also it might be a little bit of air trapped under there. So squeezing it down, that can help, but also using products like microset. So here I'm going to use the microsol. Just dunk my brush in there, wipe off the excess, and what I want to do is just get enough of this stuff over the decal and just over the edges as well, so it sort of seeps under the decal. So you can see there, I haven't sort of, put heaps on, but it's enough to sort of get around the decal and underneath the edges. So I'll do the other side too while I'm at it. And you really don't want to, be flooding the whole sort of surface of the part. You just want to be concentrating on the actual decal itself. And what's really important is that once it's got that solution on it, you do not touch it. So it's likely that you'll see, potentially some wrinkling of the decal, and that's perfectly normal. Let's see if it's already happening on the other one. It's maybe a little bit difficult to see on camera. If we get in the right light, you can see maybe there's a little bit of a wrinkle there, and that's perfectly natural because what it's doing is it's sort of melting the decal a little bit so it sits down, and it will actually flatten out over time. If it doesn't, it's just a matter of sort of reapplying more microsol. Wait for it to completely dry and then apply some more. Okay, so I'll just put that to the side and move on to the next one. Okay, now this is a round surface, this one, so I am going to use microset, which hopefully will assist me. And I also want to make sure I've got this up the right way. I believe the front points, yeah, so that's the front that way. And that's the top of it. I guess if I get it wrong, it's not the end of the world. So you see the microset will actually bead quite a bit, and that's fine. It's not a drama. I just dab the decal on the paper towel, and then I'm going to put my wrist on here, try and steady it, and then gently maneuver I sort of want to make sure it's sitting in the middle somewhere, so that's pretty good. I mean, you can tweak these things forever and a day, and sometimes it's so I'm trying to work out where I get it centered. I guess between these two here, so I need to move it over a little bit. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't make much of a difference. I've put down lots of crooked decals before, and when they're sitting on a shelf, no one will notice. Just rolling the cotton bud across, nice and gently. There we go. Alright, so I've got the other one for the other side. Same process. Now, the problem with this one is it has actually come right off the paper. No, caramba. Oops, might help if I put some get this down. Oh, it's all gone pear-shaped. Right, what do I want to do? Right, I'm going to clean that so I don't lose that. And I want to get some microset down on here. So there's my microset down, and then it's a matter of getting the decal. I'll put this back on to keep it steady for me and something to have some leverage on. And let's try and sort out this disaster. Okay, so you can see what's happened is the decal has folded under the paper. So I'm going to try and maneuver it off again. So certainly the longer decals can prove to be trickier. There we go. And of course I keep bumping the camera. Decals can be quite fiddly, but I do tend to find that once you get in the zone, again, it's kind of one of those processes that can be really, when people sort of talk about mindfulness and all that sort of thing, I tend to find decals do that for me. You just get in the zone. And of course, what I want to do here is replicate what I've got on both sides. So I kind of look at both of them. Not that you're actually likely to see them both at the same time, but it's really just about making sure that they're going to look alright once they're on. So I'm happy with that, which means I'm going to roll the cotton bud. And just get all that water out from underneath. And a bit of fluff from the cotton bud as well. Okay, so next thing is to put some microsol on. If you hear that squeaking, that's my chair. Don't worry, it's not like I haven't eaten too many beans or anything like that. So I'm coating the surface and just around the edge. And again, you might see the decal wrinkle a little bit. There's just a smidge of. It is not going to focus on me. But you'll have to take my word for it. It's started to wrinkle, but that's fine. That's nothing to worry about. Alright, so these last two, let's have a look and see how they're going to work. I might use microset here as well. So I'm just going to put a little bit there. Stuff always smells like vinegar to me. It's not the most pleasant smell. Alright, so make sure I've got the decal around the right way, and of course I drop it on the model straight away. Sliding it on. Now if you're using actually I might move that one up. I think I prefer it at the top of that section. Here we go. Just be mindful if you're using old decals, sometimes they can tear. You're usually alright with smaller decals, but some of the bigger ones, you just got to be a bit careful of. Or poorly made decals. I've come across my fair share of those. So I just want to make sure that it's sitting in the right spot. And again, I am just literally rolling the cotton bud across to squeeze out any water. And the final one. And of course I've made it hard for myself by putting it where you have to compare it with the one next to it, so you need to make sure that it's pretty spot on. Now sometimes it helps to dab just a bit of the water off, because you might find it might be sitting just on the, sitting on a bit of water, and it tends to move too easily, so you might just want to dab a little bit of water off before maneuvering it. But that'll do for me, I reckon. I think that's enough warnings on the backpack. People aren't aware that there's going to be a blast of air come out of there, then they need to get some reading glasses. Alright, so I'm going to stop it there as far as the decals go. I'll put some microsol on that I just did. But yeah, I'll go through and do the rest of the decals, and then it'll be ready for matte varnish. So I'll be using the SMS matte varnish, or flat clear, I think they call it. So I'll be using that, and I guess that'll be the stage where we really see how all this stuff has come together. The paint, the panel lines and the decals, and just to see how everything has behaved.